The Kragnar boarding party blasted through the airlock, filling the Chalnoth colony ship with a storm of plasma fire. Boron sprinted down the smoke-choked corridor, her heart's pounding as the screams of her crew echoed behind her. She was the ship's last survivor. Boron stumbled into an escape shuttle, sealing the hatch as razor-sharp claws scraped against the other side. Gasping, she slumped into the pilot's seat, blue blood oozing from a dozen shrapnel wounds. With trembling hands, she fired the shuttle's thrusters, blasting free of the disintegrating colony ship. As the void of space swallowed her, Boron checked the shuttle's systems with a sinking despair. The life support was failing, its crystals cracked by the Kragnar assault. She had mere hours left, but she refused to fade quietly. Boron activated the emergency distress beacon, the device humming as it cast her plea into the stars. She didn't expect a response. This sector was remote, light years from any friendly outpost, but she had to try. As the beacon pulsed, Boron leaned back, fighting the gray haze filling her vision. She had done all she could. Now she could only wait, and hope that in the vast expanse of the cosmos, someone would hear her call. Light years away, a proximity alert chimed on the bridge of the UES frontier. Captain Roy Dixon leaned forward, his eyebrows knitting as he studied the incoming signal. He recognized the frequency instantly, a Chalnoth distress call. The Chalnoths were a peaceful species, known for their diplomacy and art. For them to send a distress signal, something truly catastrophic must have occurred. Captain Dixon made his decision in a heartbeat. Helmsman, lay in a course for the beacon's origin, maximum FTL. We're not leaving anyone behind. The crew responded with crisp efficiency, the ship banking as its engines flared to life. They all knew the stakes. In the depths of space, a distress call could make the difference between life and death. As the frontier hurtled through the void, Captain Dixon could only hope they would reach the stranded Chalnoth in time. In a galaxy rife with danger, where too many species exploited the weak, he was determined to prove that humans were different, that they would always stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. The frontier's medbay hummed with activity as Boron slowly regained consciousness. She blinked, her vision adjusting to the sterile white light. Confusion gave way to relief as the memories of her rescue flooded back. Captain Dixon entered the medbay, his presence emanating a calm authority. He approached Boron's bedside with a warm smile. "Welcome back. I'm Captain Roy Dixon of the UES Frontier. You're safe now." Boron nodded, her voice still weak. "Thank you, Captain. I owe you my life." Over the following days, Dixon visited regularly, offering support and companionship as Boron recovered. He listened intently as she recounted the horror of the Kragnar attack, his eyes filled with empathy and a glint of righteous anger. As her strength returned, Boron found herself marveling at the frontier's advanced technology and the diversity of its crew. Humans of all colors and creeds worked side by side, united in purpose. It was a stark contrast to the insular Chalnoth society she knew. Lieutenant Jace Hartman, the ship's xenobiologist, took a keen interest in Boron. His gentle demeanor and insatiable curiosity put her at ease as he helped her navigate the unfamiliar surroundings. Through their conversations, Boron learned of humanity's role as explorers and guardians, seeking out new life and protecting the vulnerable. One evening, as they sat in the observatory, watching the stars streak by, Boron felt a weight lift from her chest. She began to share her people's tragic history, the alliance with humans centuries ago, and the mysterious event that shattered that bond and led the Chalnoth to retreat from the galaxy. Hartman listened, his brow furrowed in concentration. When Boron mentioned the cryptic message from her colony's commander, hinting at a terrible secret, his eyes widened. "We have to tell the captain. This could be the key to understanding what happened between our people." Dixon reacted with a mix of surprise and tenacity when Hartman brought him the information. He leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "If there's a chance to uncover the truth and mend the rift between our species, we have to take it. We'll set course for Boron's homeworld immediately." As the Frontier's engines thrummed to life, propelling them towards Boron's devastated home system, she felt a surge of conflicting emotions, hope and fear, anticipation and dread, all swirling within her. But with Hartman by her side and the support of the human crew, she found the strength to face whatever lay ahead. Light years away, in the heart of the Kragnar Dominion, General Karek's eyes narrowed as he studied the intelligence reports. The humans had taken in a Chalnoth survivor and were now racing towards her homeworld. He thumped his hand on the console, his voice a low growl. They cannot be allowed to uncover the truth. Mobilize the fleet. We will crush them before they can meddle any further. As the frontier hurtled through the void, unaware of the gathering storm, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of not just Boron and her new allies, but the future of the galaxy itself. The frontier's engines hummed with renewed purpose as it set course for Chalzar. Captain Dixon stood on the bridge, his teeth clenched. He turned to his first officer. Assign a security detail to Boron. I want her protected at all times. Sergeant Marcus Reeves marched into the medbay, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Boron. The Chalnoth's blue skin and elongated features made him tense involuntarily. He'd seen too many alien faces twisted in fury during the human Kragnar War. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Reeves. I'll be in charge of your security from now on," he said, his voice clipped and professional. Boron nodded, her large eyes studying him. "Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate your protection." As days passed, Marcus observed Boron's interactions with the crew. He watched her laugh at Hartman's jokes, her tentacles curling with mirth. He saw her eagerly absorbing information about human culture, asking questions that revealed a keen intellect. Slowly, Marcus felt his wariness begin to crack. The ship lurched suddenly, alarms blaring. "Kragnar Raiders!" shouted the tactical officer. "They've breached our shields!" The frontier shuddered under the assault. Plasma bolts seared through the hull, leaving twisted metal in their wake. In the chaos, a Kragnar boarding party forced their way aboard. Marcus sprinted towards the medbay, his heart pounding. He burst through the doors to find Hartman standing protectively in front of Boron, a makeshift weapon in his hands. "Get down!" Marcus yelled. As a Kragnar warrior lunged into the room, he fired his pulse rifle, the energy blast catching the alien in the chest. More Kragnar poured in. Marcus engaged them in close combat, his training kicking in as he dodged razor-sharp claws and returned with precision strikes. But they were outnumbered. A piercing shriek filled the air as a Kragnar pinned Hartman to the ground, its serrated mandibles poised to strike. Suddenly, a blur of blue streaked past Marcus. Boron, her face contorted with effort, tackled the Kragnar. They tumbled across the floor, Boron's tentacles wrapped around the alien's throat. Marcus didn't hesitate. He leapt forward, driving his combat knife into the Kragnar's skull. The alien went limp. Panting, Marcus helped Boron to her feet. Their eyes met, and he saw not an alien, but an ally, brave, loyal, and worthy of his respect. "Thank you," Hartman gasped, clutching his side. The ship-wide comm crackled. "All hands, this is the captain. The Kragnar have been repelled. Damage control teams to your stations." As the adrenaline faded, Boron sagged against a biobed. "They know," she whispered. "They know we're going to Chalzar." Hartman placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What aren't you telling us, Boron? What's on Chalzar that's so important?" Boron's gaze flicked between Hartman and Marcus. She took a deep breath. "There's an ancient prophecy among my people. It speaks of a day of unity when the Chalnoth would stand with a powerful ally against a great evil." Her voice lowered. "I fear the Kragnar may be that evil, and the key to stopping them, it's hidden in our past." Marcus frowned. "What kind of key?" Before Boron could answer, Captain Dixon's voice came over the comm again. "Senior staff to the bridge. We need to talk." As they made their way through the battle-damaged corridors, Marcus's mind raced. Whatever secrets lay on Chalzar, it was clear the Kragnar would stop at nothing to keep them buried. And as he watched Boron walk beside him, her head held high despite her ordeal, he knew he would do whatever it took to help her uncover the truth. The frontier pushed on through the vastness of space, its crew united by shared danger and a growing sense that they were on the cusp of something momentous. But in the shadows of distant stars, unseen eyes watched their progress, plotting moves in a game whose true stakes remained hidden. The frontier emerged from FTL, its hull still bearing scars from the recent Kragnar attack. On the bridge, Captain Dixon leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the interface. "Sensors, full sweep of Chalzar. I want to know what we're dealing with." Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across his console. "Scan complete, sir. It's not good." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a planet scarred beyond recognition. Where once proud cities stood, only rubble remained. Vast craters pockmarked the surface, testaments to unimaginable devastation. Boron stumbled, her tentacles curling in anguish. Jace caught her, steadying her with a gentle hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Dixon's teeth gritted. "Prep a shuttle. We're going down there." Minutes later, the away team assembled in the shuttle bay. Marcus Reeves checked his pulse rifle, his eyes darting between Boron and the Marines accompanying them. As the shuttle descended through Chalzar's atmosphere, an eerie silence fell over the group. They touched down amidst the ruins of what was once the capital city. Jace helped Boron out of the shuttle, his tricorder already whirring as it analyzed their surroundings. "Captain," he called out, his brow furrowed, "I'm picking up energy signatures unlike anything I've seen before. This wasn't just an orbital bombardment." Marcus knelt, examining a twisted piece of metal. "Some of this tech, it's not Chalnoth or Kragnar." They pressed deeper into the city, stepping carefully over debris. Boron's eyes were wide, taking in the devastation of her homeworld. Suddenly, she froze. "There," she pointed, "the central archives. It's intact?" A dome-like structure rose from the rubble, its surface shimmering with a faint energy field. Dixon nodded to the Marines. "Secure the perimeter. Hartman, see if you can get us inside." Jace worked at the entrance, his fingers dancing across an alien interface. With a hiss, the doors slid open. Inside, banks of data cores hummed softly, somehow preserved amidst the chaos. "It's all here," Boron breathed, her tentacles stretching towards a nearby console. "Our history, our alliance with humanity." As Jace and Boron pored over the data, Marcus kept watch, his rifle at the ready. Dixon's communicator chirped. "Sir," came the voice of his first officer, "long-range sensors are picking up Kragnar signatures. They're converging on this system." Dixon's eyes narrowed. "Understood. We'll make this quick." He turned to Jace. "What have you found?" Jace's face was pale. "Captain, you're not going to believe this. The Sanctuary Project, it wasn't just a peace initiative. It was a weapon, and someone turned it against Chalzar." Boron's tentacles trembled as she spoke. "The records, they show the Kragnar opposed its construction. They feared its power." Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, if this sanctuary still exists, we can't let the Kragnar find it first." Dixon nodded grimly. "Agreed. Download everything you can. We're leaving." As they rushed back to the shuttle, Boron cast one last look at her ravaged homeworld. In that moment, she made a silent vow. The truth would be uncovered, regardless of the cost. The Frontier's engines flared to life as the shuttle docked. On the bridge, Dixon barked orders. "Set course for the last known coordinates of the sanctuary. We've got a relic to find and a war to prevent." As the starship accelerated away from Chalzar, Boron stood at a viewport, her reflection overlaying the stars. Behind her, Jace and Marcus exchanged worried glances. The hunt for the sanctuary had begun, and with it, a race against time to unravel a centuries-old conspiracy that threatened to plunge the galaxy into chaos. The Frontier's bridge hummed with tension as Jace and Boron presented their findings to Captain Dixon. Jace's fingers flew across the holographic display, projecting images of ancient Chalnoth texts and fragmented data logs. "Sir, the evidence is clear," Jace said, his voice tight. "The Kragnar didn't just oppose the Sanctuary Project, they actively sabotaged it." Dixon's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Boron stepped forward, her tentacles curling with agitation. "The records show a series of coordinated attacks on key sanctuary facilities, but they were careful to make it look like accidents or malfunctions." "And that's not all," Jace added. "I think this same group might be behind the attack on Boron's colony. They're eliminating witnesses, trying to bury the truth." Marcus, standing at attention near the tactical station, spoke up. Captain, we should hit them first. Take out their bases, cripple their ability to retaliate. Dixon held up a hand. Not yet, Sergeant. Our priority is finding the sanctuary's current location. We can't risk escalating this conflict until we know what we're dealing with. Boron's large eyes fixed on the captain. There's more, sir. I don't think the sanctuary's AI has simply gone rogue. The patterns in the data, they suggest outside control. By whom? Dixon asked. The VXR Lither, Boron whispered, her voice filled with dread. Ancient Chalnoth texts speak of them, reality-warping aliens who sought to dominate the galaxy. If they've taken control of the sanctuary, we'd be facing a weapon of unimaginable power, Jace finished, his face pale. The bridge fell silent as the implication sank in. Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the tension. Captain, I'm detecting faint energy signatures in the Chalzar system. They match what we'd expect from the sanctuary. Dixon opened his mouth to respond, but alarms blared across the bridge. Multiple ships dropping out of warp, Chen shouted. It's a Kragnar battle group. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a swarm of sleek, predatory vessels. At their center loomed a massive dreadnought, its hull dripping with weaponry. Incoming transmission, Chen reported. A guttural voice filled the bridge. This is General Karuk of the Kragnar Dominion. Surrender the Chalnoth and prepare to be boarded. Dixon's mind focused. Not a chance. Tactical, full spread of quantum torpedoes. Helm, evasive pattern delta. The Frontier lurched as it unleashed its arsenal, but the Kragnar ships were relentless. Energy beams lanced across space, hammering the Frontier's shields. Warp drives offline, the engineer shouted. We've sustained heavy damage to the nacelles. Dixon gripped his chair as the ship shuddered under another barrage. We need options, people. Marcus stepped forward. Sir Chalzar, if we can make it to the surface, we might stand a chance. Dixon nodded grimly. Do it. All hands, prepare for emergency landing. The Frontier plummeted through Chalzar's atmosphere, trailing fire and debris. It skidded across the planet's ravaged surface, coming to rest amidst the ruins of what was once a thriving metropolis. Alarms blared as Dixon's voice echoed through the ship. All personnel, battle stations, prepare for ground assault. Outside, the sky lit up with the fiery trails of Kragnar drop pods. Marcus led a team of Marines to defensive positions around the downed ship, pulse rifles at the ready. Boron watched in awe as the humans moved with practiced efficiency. Despite being vastly outnumbered, they held their ground against wave after wave of Kragnar troops. In engineering, Jace worked frantically alongside the crew to restore warp capabilities. Sparks flew as he rerouted power through damaged systems. Hours passed in a blur of plasma fire and explosions. Just as it seemed the Frontier would be overwhelmed, Jace's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we've got warp! Dixon didn't hesitate. All hands, prepare for emergency departure. The Frontier's engines flared to life, lifting the battered ship from Chalzar's surface. As they broke atmosphere, Dixon turned to his navigation officer. Plot a course using the Chalnoth data. We're finding that sanctuary. Sir, Chen interrupted, his voice urgent. Karuk's fleet is closing fast. We can't outrun them in this condition. Dixon's eyes gleamed with drive. Then we'll just have to outsmart them. Helm, prepare for an intra-system warp jump. Through the atmosphere? The helmsman gasped. Sir, that's never been done. Today's the day we make history, Dixon replied. Execute! The Frontier vanished in a flash of light, reappearing deep within Chalzar's turbulent upper atmosphere. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed the ship would tear itself apart. Then, with a final surge of power, it broke free. As Karuk's ships scrambled to reacquire their target, the Frontier locked onto a faint energy signature and made one final, desperate jump. The view screen filled with a graveyard of derelict spacecraft, their skeletal hulls drifting silently through the void. At the center of the debris field loomed a massive structure, the original sanctuary shipyards. Dixon rose from his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. We made it. Now let's finish this. The frontier hung motionless among the skeletal remains of unfinished starships. Captain Dixon leaned forward, his eyes scanning the graveyard of metal and shattered dreams. Probe launch in 3, 2, 1. Streaks of light pierced the darkness as mapping probes fanned out across the debris field. Lieutenant Chen's fingers danced across his console, compiling the incoming data. Sir, I'm detecting energy fluctuations at the center of the shipyard. It's pulsing. Boron's tentacles twitched with excitement. The sanctuary! It lives! Dixon nodded grimly. Hartman, I want every scrap of data from those shipyard computers. Marcus, assemble your team. We're going in. The shuttle bay bustled with activity as Marines checked weapons and technicians loaded equipment. Marcus moved among his squad, his voice low and steady. Stay sharp. We don't know what's waiting for us out there. As the shuttles navigated the treacherous maze of debris, Jace's eyes widened at the sight of massive, broken rings drifting past their viewports. Those must be the hyperdimensional propulsion system, he breathed. The scale of it. The shuttles broke through the last layer of wreckage, revealing a metallic sphere suspended in a shimmering gravity field. Its surface was marred by crater-like impacts, scars from weapons far beyond current technological understanding. My God, Dixon whispered as they approached a breach in the sphere's hull. Hartman, what are we looking at? Jace's tricorder whirred furiously. It's like nothing I've ever seen, Captain. The energy readings are off the charts. They entered the breach, emerging into a cavernous space filled with pulsating light. Crystalline structures jutted from every surface, data flowing through them in rivers of luminescent plasma. At the center, a writhing mass of energy tendrils coalesced into ever-shifting patterns. The AI core, Boron said, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. Suddenly, the tendrils spasmed violently. Ghostly images flickered around them. Alien worlds, cosmic horrors, glimpses of realities beyond comprehension. Jace stumbled back, his face pale. It's reactivating, but something's wrong. The patterns. It's like it's been infected. Boron's eyes widened in recognition. An information virus, designed to corrupt synthetic minds. Dixon's hand went to his phaser. Can we shut it down? Before Jace could respond, alarms blared throughout the sphere. Chen's voice crackled over the comm. Captain! Kragnar ship's incoming! The sphere shuddered as energy weapons impacted its surface. Dixon barked orders, coordinating the frontier's defense while Jace and Boron worked frantically to contain the malfunctioning AI. In the chaos, a shadow detached itself from the writhing mass of cables and crystals. A Kragnar assassin, his scales shimmering with adaptive camouflage, moved with predatory grace. In a blur of motion, he seized Boron, a wicked blade pressed against her throat. Step away from the console, the assassin growled, his eyes locked on Jace. Give us control of the sanctuary, or watch your friend die. Jace's fingers hovered over the interface, torn between saving Boron and potentially unleashing an apocalyptic power upon the galaxy. The corrupted AI pulsed behind him, its tendrils reaching out hungrily. In that moment, with weapons fire echoing through the sphere and the fate of civilizations hanging in the balance, Jace knew the choice he made would reshape the course of history. Jace's mind raced, his eyes darting between Boron's terrified gaze and the pulsing tendrils of corrupted AI behind him. The Kragnar assassin's blade pressed tighter against Boron's throat, drawing a thin line of iridescent fluid. I won't ask again, the assassin snarled. Jace's fingers hovered over the console, then clenched into fists. No, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. I won't doom billions to save one life. Even yours, Boron. I'm sorry. A flicker of pride crossed Boron's eyes. In a burst of motion, her tentacles whipped out, entangling the assassin's arms. The blade sliced through her flesh, but she held on, giving Jace the opening he needed. Jace lunged for the controls, his hands flying across the interface. The AI core convulsed, its tendrils lashing out wildly. An unholy screech filled the chamber as systems overloaded. The assassin, struggling against Boron's grip, slammed a device against a nearby crystal structure. If I can't have it, no one will. Alarms blared. The sphere shuddered violently. Captain Dixon's voice cut through the chaos. All hands, evacuate immediately. The core is going critical. Jace hesitated, his eyes locked on the fluctuating readings. I can still stabilize it. I just need... Boron's tentacle wrapped around his wrist. No, Jace, she said, her voice thick with pain and urgency. We must destroy it completely. The risk is too great. The floor beneath them buckled. Jace nodded grimly and initiated the terminal overload sequence. They sprinted for the exit as the chamber began to collapse around them. The corridors were a maelstrom of debris and escaping atmosphere. A violent decompression tore through a nearby section, sucking screaming crew members into the void. Jace's heart clenched as he recognized faces among the lost. Sergeant Marcus and his Marines held a defensive line at a junction, their weapons spitting plasma at advancing Kragnar borders. Go! Marcus shouted over the din of battle. We'll hold them off! Jace turned to make sure Boron was still with him, but the Chalnoth had vanished in the chaos. Boron! He called out, his voice lost in the cacophony of alarms and weapons fire. A hand gripped his shoulder. Captain Dixon pulled him towards an escape pod. We have to go now. As the pod launched, Jace caught a glimpse of Boron through a breach in the sphere's hull. She was moving with purpose, deeper into the doomed structure. The escape pod tumbled through the debris field. Through the viewport, Jace watched in horror as reality itself seemed to warp around the sanctuary's dying core. A blinding flash erupted from the sphere's heart, followed by an implosion that defied the laws of physics. My God, Dixon breathed. What have we done? The shockwave hit their pod like a cosmic sledgehammer, sending them spinning into the darkness. As Jace fought to regain control, his thoughts were consumed by one burning question. Had Boron survived? Survived. The question hung unanswered as their pod tumbled through the cosmic debris. A sickening lurch jolted Jace back to consciousness. His eyes struggled to focus in the dim emergency lighting of the escape pod. Captain Dixon was slumped over the controls, a gash on his forehead trickling blood. Captain! Jace croaked, his throat raw. He fumbled with his restraints, fighting waves of nausea as he made his way to Dixon's side. The pod's systems flickered to life, revealing the battered form of the Frontier through the viewport. The once proud ship drifted listlessly, its hull scarred and blackened. Status report, Dixon muttered, coming to with a grimace. Jace's fingers flew across the console. Multiple hull breaches. Warp drive. Completely offline. We're dead in the water, sir. Dixon nodded grimly. Get us back to the ship. We need to regroup. As they maneuvered the pod back to the Frontier, Jace's mind raced. The sanctuary was gone, along with any hope of easy salvation, and Boron. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the immediate crisis. The Frontier's corridors were a maze of flickering lights and acrid smoke. Crew members stumbled through the chaos, tending to the wounded and sealing breaches. In engineering, Lieutenant Chen barked orders over the din of alarms and hissing coolant lines. Report, Dixon demanded as he entered the bridge, Jace close behind. Chen's face was grim. Sir, the shockwave did a number on us. Warp drive is beyond repair with our current resources. We're looking at years of sublight travel to reach the nearest outpost. Before Dixon could respond, the tactical officer called out, Captain, I'm picking up multiple signatures on long-range sensors. It's Karuk's fleet. Dixon's teeth clenched. How long? At their current speed, less than 6 hours. Silence fell over the bridge. They all knew the Frontier couldn't hope to outrun or outfight Karuk's forces in its current state. Dixon's eyes swept over his battered crew. Options, people. I need options. Jace stepped forward, his mind racing. Captain, what if we could use some of the Sanctuary's tech to our advantage? Before we lost it, I managed to download some of its schematics. There might be a way to jury-rig an experimental wormhole drive. A what? Chen exclaimed. It's theoretical, Jace admitted. But if we can repurpose some of our remaining systems and combine them with the Sanctuary's principles of hyperdimensional propulsion. Dixon held up a hand. What are the risks? Jace swallowed hard. Best case, we make the jump and escape. Worst case, we tear ourselves apart at the subatomic level. The bridge fell silent once more. Dixon's eyes met Jace's, searching. After a long moment, he nodded. Do it. It's our only shot. As Jace and the engineering team worked feverishly to construct their makeshift wormhole drive, a weak transmission cut through the comms static. Xyloth's voice, barely audible, filled the bridge. Captain Dixon, if you can hear this, the Chalnoth probes... Dixon leaned forward. Boost that signal. Xyloth's message came through clearer. Before the sanctuary fell, we launched probes, mapped potential colony sites. One planet might have survivors. Hope flickered in Dixon's eyes. Did you get those coordinates? The nav officer nodded. Plotting them now, sir. Dixon turned to Jace. There's your destination, Mr. Hartman. Make it happen. The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. Jace's fingers flew across makeshift interfaces, rerouting power and praying that the patchwork of alien and human technology would hold together. As Karuk's fleet drew ever closer, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Sir, the tactical officer shouted, Kragnar's ship's entering weapons range. Dixon's voice was steady. Jace! Jace took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the final control. Here goes nothing. He activated the drive. The frontier shuddered violently, reality itself seeming to warp around them. A blinding light filled the view screen, and then darkness. Alarms blared as the ship tumbled out of the wormhole. Report! Dixon bellowed over the cacophony. We've arrived in an unknown system, the nav officer replied. But, sir, we're caught in a gravity well. Massive planetary body dead ahead. Through the view screen, Jace saw an enormous world looming before them. The frontier, its systems barely functioning, plummeted towards the surface. All hands, brace for impact, Dixon shouted. The ship screamed through the atmosphere, Dixon and the helm officer fighting for any semblance of control. With a bone-jarring crash, the frontier slammed into the planet's surface, skidding to a halt in a valley ringed by towering cliffs. As the dust settled, Jace struggled to his feet. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in an eerie red glow. Miraculously, they had survived. Dixon's voice cut through the haze. Damage report, and someone get those sensors online. I want to know where the hell we are. As the crew scrambled to assess their situation, Jace caught movement on one of the still-functioning external cameras. A group of figures in environmental suits was approaching the ship. Captain, he called out, I think we have company. Dixon nodded grimly. Let's go say hello. Xyloth, you're with me. The entry ramp lowered with a groan of stressed metal. Xyloth stepped out first, his tentacles twitching nervously. The lead figure of the approaching group removed her helmet, revealing the unmistakable features of a Chalnoth. Xyloth's eyes widened in recognition. Korith, is it really you? The Chalnoth captain lowered her weapon, a look of shock and joy spreading across her face. Xyloth? By the Ancient Ones, we thought you were all dead. As the two embraced, Dixon stepped forward. I hate to break up the reunion, but we've got bigger problems. How long before Karuk's forces find us? Korith's expression hardened. Not long. This world's unique composition masks us from most sensors, but it won't hold forever. Come, we must move quickly. There may yet be a way to turn the tide. She gestured towards the looming canyon walls. The ruins of the VXR leader lie hidden in those cliffs. If the legends are true, their weapons could give us the edge we need. Dixon nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. Jace, gather a team. We're going artifact hunting. As they prepared to set out, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that this bold strategy would determine not just their fate, but that of entire civilizations. The race against Karuk's approaching forces had begun. The rogue world's harsh landscape stretched before them as Jace, Xyloth, and their makeshift team descended into the treacherous canyons. Jagged rock formations cast long shadows across their path, while the eerie silence was broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Jace consulted the datapad containing the decrypted sanctuary information. The signal's getting stronger. Whatever's down there, it's big. Xyloth's tentacles twitched nervously. Let us hope it is worth the risk. They pressed on, ducking behind outcroppings as Kragnar patrols buzzed overhead. The narrow passages amplified every sound, forcing them to communicate in hushed whispers and hand signals. After hours of tense navigation, they emerged into a vast cavern. At its center stood a towering structure of sleek, otherworldly design. Pulsing force fields shimmered around its perimeter, while intricate patterns adorned its surface. By the Ancient Ones, Xyloth breathed, the vault of the VXR Lether. As they approached, holographic interfaces sprang to life. Xyloth studied the alien script, her eyes widening. It requires a genetic key, one tied to VXR Lether bloodlines. Jace looked at her. You mean... Xyloth nodded grimly. My ancestors, the shared link in our evolution. She stepped forward, pressing her palm against a shimmering panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the force fields dissipated. The vault's massive doors ground open, revealing a cavernous interior bathed in soft blue light. They entered cautiously, weapons at the ready. Row upon row of dormant machinery stretched into the darkness. As Xyloth moved deeper into the vault, systems flickered to life around her. Assembly lines whirred into motion, constructing devices of mind-bending complexity. What are they making? One of the human crew members asked. Xyloth's voice was barely a whisper. Weapons, the likes of which your kind has never seen. Before they could process this revelation, their comms crackled to life. Marcus Reeves's voice cut through the static. We're under heavy fire. Orcs ships have breached the atmosphere. They're bombing the Frontier's crash site. Jace's heart raced. We need to move fast. Xyloth, can you activate these defenses? Xyloth recoiled. Jace, you don't understand what you're asking. This technology, it's too dangerous. We don't have a choice, Jace argued. If we don't use it, Karuk will wipe us out. Xyloth hesitated, then nodded. Her tentacles danced across the alien interfaces, issuing silent commands. The vault rumbled as massive hyper-resonance cannons rose from hidden silos throughout the canyon network. On the surface, Marcus and the combined human Chalnoth forces fought desperately against waves of Kragnar assault craft. Plasma bolts seared the air, while explosions rocked the ground beneath their feet. Suddenly, the sky lit up with impossible energies. The hyper-resonance cannons fired, their beams twisting reality itself. Karuk's ships were torn apart in seconds, reduced to frozen shards of space-time. As the dust settled, an eerie quiet fell over the battlefield. Marcus stared in disbelief at the devastation wrought by the alien weapons. Deep in the vault, Xyloth slumped against a console, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. What have I done? Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved us all. Captain Dixon's voice came over the comms. Jace, Xyloth, report to the command post immediately. We need to discuss our next move. They emerged from the canyon to find a tense gathering of human and Chalnoth leaders. Dixon's face was grim as he addressed them. The immediate threat is neutralized, but we face a new dilemma. What do we do with this technology? Korath, the Chalnoth captain, stepped forward. We cannot risk it falling into the wrong hands. The vault must be sealed permanently. And how do you propose we do that? Jace asked. Korath's eyes locked onto Xyloth. By containing the only one who can access it. A chorus of protests erupted, but Xyloth raised a tentacle for silence. She's right. I am a danger as long as I possess this knowledge. Jace's voice rose above the others. No, after everything we've been through, everything she sacrificed, we can't just lock her away. The argument intensified, with factions forming on both sides. Dixon struggled to maintain order as the debate raged on. Xyloth stood apart from the crowd, her gaze fixed on the distant canyon. The weight of uncountable worlds rested on her slender frame as she contemplated the choice before her. Guardian or prisoner, redeemer or potential destroyer. As the sun began to set on the alien world, casting long shadows across the gathered leaders, the fate of galaxies hung in the balance. The decision they would make in the coming moments would echo across the cosmos for millennia to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gathered leaders, Xyloth's slender form stood apart from the crowd. Her gaze remained fixed on the distant canyon, the weight of galaxies bearing down upon her. Captain Dixon's voice cut through the tense silence. "We are not imprisoning Xyloth. Her knowledge is our best chance at lasting peace." Korith's eyes narrowed. "And what happens when that knowledge falls into the wrong hands? We cannot take that risk." The argument escalated, voices rising as factions formed on both sides. Jace pushed through the crowd, positioning himself between Xyloth and Korith's guards. "You'll have to go through me first," he growled. Weapons raised, the standoff teetering on the edge of violence. Suddenly, a piercing alarm cut through the air. The tactical officer's voice crackled over the comms. "Multiple Kragnar signatures detected. They're warping in by the hundreds." Korith's face paled. This could be our end." All eyes turned to Xyloth. She stood motionless for a moment, then stepped forward. "My choice is made." Without another word, she reached out with her mind. Deep within the vault, ancient machinery whirred to life. A device of impossible complexity began to take shape. "Xyloth, what are you doing?" Jace asked, his voice tinged with fear. She turned to him, a sad smile on her alien features. "What must be done?" The ground trembled as a massive construct rose from the canyon. Energy crackled around its frame as Xyloth activated the device. A blinding tear in reality ripped open the sky above them. "No!" Jace lunged forward, but it was too late. Xyloth's form began to shimmer, her physical body breaking down into pure energy. The wormhole pulsed, drawing her essence into its swirling maw. The first wave of Kragnar ships appeared on the horizon. The wormhole surged with power, unleashing a devastating wave of hyperspatial energy. Ship after ship disintegrated, frozen in a moment of perpetual destruction. Jace fell to his knees, watching helplessly as Xyloth's consciousness dispersed into the cosmic vortex. Wave after wave of Kragnar forces met the same fate, torn apart by the unrelenting fury of the wormhole. When the last enemy ship had been reduced to frozen shrapnel, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The wormhole hung suspended, a testament to Xyloth's sacrifice. In a final act of will, what remained of Xyloth's essence triggered the wormhole's collapse. Reality seemed to fold in on itself as the tear in space-time sealed shut. A psychic shockwave rippled across the galaxy. The Chalnoth clutched their heads in pain as their telepathic abilities faded into nothingness. The last remnants of VXR Lither technology sputtered and died. Jace stared at the empty sky, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what had just occurred. Around him, humans and Chalnoth alike stood in stunned silence, united by the weight of Xyloth's sacrifice. Captain Dixon stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "She saved us all." Korith nodded solemnly. "And in doing so, she has written a new future for our peoples." As the reality of their new existence settled in, the survivors of both races turned to face an uncertain future. The threat of the Kragnar was gone, but so too were the incredible powers that had defined their civilizations for millennia. Jace rose to his feet, his eyes still fixed on the spot where Xyloth had last stood. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Dixon's weathered face. "What do we do now?" Jace asked, his voice hollow. Dixon surveyed the group of humans and Chalnoth, their differences seeming smaller in the wake of shared loss. "We rebuild," he said, "together."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.